We're going to start off by looking at definitions. I've got a couple of words here. These are definitions of words that are used in a specific industry, jargon we call it. I know it's a bit silly to point this out, but if you look at these words without the designated meanings as they are written here, and that they're written here for a specific sector that uses, this is according to the Parliament website, this is what they say these words mean. So if we had to look at this on our own, we'd be thinking about a house or a bill of a bird, or what you pay at the end of a meal. An act could mean what your teenager does to try to throw you off the track about what they're thinking and feeling. And hearing is not going to mean what we think it means in this term. We're going to think about, what we can hear. So if we can consider how silly this is and then relate it to how ludicrous our situation has actually become, it starts to make sense that some people think that homeschooling can actually happen at school. This kind of thinking causes a lot of misunderstandings in our community, neighborhoods, possibly even our homes. But when it comes to matters of law, the meanings of words are defined for the purposes of making their use binding on us in some way. So when you see a document, it will start with definitions of what the things in that document mean. And you have to read the document with those definitions in mind, even if the word actually means something else to you. It's important that we understand that the words that we use are defined according to what the government tells us they are defined. We can't decide what act, house, hearing, bill, parliament, all those things mean. We have to use their definition, and that does make it more difficult when we speak to each other and when we write submissions to them. So we really have to become quite a fay with what they mean when they say bill and what they mean when they say act. For instance, at the moment, we're dealing with the amendments, which are in the BELA bill, and we are calling them clauses. Once the bill is passed, we can't even refer to them as clauses anymore. They're going to be sections because now they're inside an act. Another thing I wanted to just mention is that we tend as people to only really react to this sort of problem that we have now when things are very serious and not when we see that the seriousness is approaching. I'm not sure why, but anyway, maybe it's human nature, but we now are squarely in the zone where the approach of a serious situation has ended. We are now at the arrival of a serious bill. It's on our doorsteps. It got here through a series of unfortunate events, and it's about to become an act. And when it becomes an act, that means it's going to govern our land. We won't have much wiggle room in terms of negotiating the law. Anyway, so with this in mind, we must remember that the School Act is what they are changing. That's pertinent to us. They're also changing the Employment of Educators Act. It's not really relevant to homeschoolers, but for those of you who want to know what's happening and for the teachers, I suggest you read that as well. I haven't personally read it. It's I want to just focus on homeschooling. I've put here an excerpt from the policy on home education. And it says here that this is about the application and the scope of the policy on home education. And you'll see here that it tells you what it applies to and where the application is exactly. This is part of a way for all the documents to refer to each other. And in doing so, these documents with their definitions, where they refer to each other, it is in keeping with the combination of those definitions. So where the definitions vary slightly or have some scope, like it might say one thing in the BELA bill, it might say the same thing, but with maybe an extra word next to it in the Schools Act, and then in the policy of home education, it might have a slight variation. It doesn't mean that they mean different things. The general meaning of the legalities will be the same, and we have to be careful to interpret it in terms of the meaning of the law. So what we're going to work with to start with is just the definitions in terms of what the BELA bill wants, because that's going to become the act. The policy becomes a subsidiary piece of legislation which is supposed to back up the act or give it more explanation. It doesn't mean that it's less valid, but if we ever go to court, we can look at those variations and you can discuss in court what that means to you. We don't know what the courts are going to decide. So a lot of what the homeschoolers and the experts and the legal people, a lot of what they say is conjecture on what they think the courts will say. It will obviously be within a specific legal framework. So a lawyer would have to advise you if you have like specific questions about how the court might rule when there is confusion, but it is only a legal opinion. We can only know when we've been to court. Another point to notice on this is because of this, it means that there is going to be some conflicting information and a variety of opinions. It's important that we speak to each other and get as many opinions as possible. Don't just go with one person's idea on what this means, because you're going to be limiting yourself. Create a bit of a scope for yourself and question your own ideas. Have a variety before you're going to conclude exactly what it is you want to think about. It's an excerpt from the Pestalozzi website, because they've got a little bit about the new definitions and how they've updated. It's a nice straightforward explanation. So I'm just going to read it for you. Okay, they say that several definitions in the Act have been updated or changed. So that's the SASA. So BELA is the update of SASA. So several of the definitions have been changed. The definition for basic education was added, stating it will now encompass the complete journey from grade R to grade 12 of the national curriculum. The role of a competent assessor has been defined as either a registered educator or an assessor who has passed a relevant course, or a body either registered to perform assessments or recognized in the field of education. We do already have some registered bodies that administer the National Senior Certificate or matric, but for the rest of it, we don't really know what the government means there. So these are terms we are always conferring about. And like I said, there isn't something that's pinned down. So I will have my opinion, Ursula will have her opinion, the Pestalozzi will put out their opinion officially as an organization. Within Lebe from the Department of Education, he has an opinion every time, and I've noticed they're different every time he speaks. So, we don't actually know what these things mean, and we hope that once this bill is here, that there will be more clarification, or at least if we take it to court, that a competent judge will hear the case and tell us what it's supposed to mean. The Pestalozzi Trust says that the exact meaning of recognized in the field of education remains unclear, and that home education is now described as a purposeful educational program, primarily or predominantly conducted within a child's home under the direct supervision of a parent. So importantly, while tutors and other forms of support are explicitly permitted, the number of subjects and the amount of time they cover, all that sort of thing is not pinned down. Of something I found recently by a writer from the 1950s, I think it was, or maybe it was further on, I'm not sure. It says it's a greater work to educate a child in the true and larger sense of the world than to rule a state. And this was so powerful to me, because this speaks to why we are being regulated in the way that we are. If we consider that the capture of a young mind can lead to the control of an entire future from an organization, then we can put into perspective what the regulations are going to mean for us, and how they're implemented is going to actually change all of our futures. Okay, so what exactly is homeschooling? So despite the semantics, it's actually not complex to come to terms with what it means. Providers use the term to describe what they're selling, and they're very often not honest with you or your child or the government. Private alternative education is what we are doing basically, via any other means than direct facilitation of the parent, that's mom or dad at home, cannot really be relegated to the category of home education because it has a legal definition. And the BELA is really about to make this very pertinent, to the tune of 12 months jail time. Education is in your child's home. I've said there that education and schooling are very similar, so we're going to use those terms interchangeably. We all have opinions about it, but they have a scope of reference in our country because there is both a legal definition and then there is also a global definition. And the South African legal definition of homeschooling is not really compatible with what the rest of the world sees it as. But because we have those laws, we're going to have to kind of stick to that. All children have a right to education, and this right is protected, and parents have to ensure that their children are getting an education. And this means that we have to either put them in a school, or we can apply for exemption from going to school and we can homeschool. And those are our two choices, home educate or school. And although the alternative scene is massive, you know, all the cottage schools and the tutor centers and distance learning, we actually only have those two options according to the law. The government has largely ignored an entire genre and sector of education that has evolved over the last 20 years. I'm not sure why that is. There have been many complaints that this hasn't been addressed by the BELA bill, and incidentally, that could be a good point to put into your submissions, that the BELA bill is outdated and it neglects to cover an entire sector of education that is absolutely relevant and pertinent. The child's education must be facilitated by the child's parent or guardian. The reason I've put that in there, it's not explicitly written like that anywhere in the law, but that is the implication. It has always been the implication, and the reason it's the implication, it comes from the Children's Act, because the parent and guardian does have full responsibility and accountability over that child. So whether that child is in your care or in the care of somebody else, if something happens to your child, you are responsible and accountable. The law can make you deal with it in those terms. So if you've left your child at a cottage school, for instance, and they are not registered, and the person does have a criminal record, and you don't know, and you think they're really nice people, and there's lots of other people there, and everything's fine, but something happened, and maybe your ex-husband decides what you did was negligent, so he's going to sue you for negligence of your child. He will have a pretty good case because you left your child somewhere with people who are not vetted to look after minor children at a place that's not registered to take children on their premises with all the bylaws, and a place that's not registered to actually give scholastic education. Okay, so we're going to move on quite quickly. What do I need to know when I start home education? Now, to know about how to write a submission for homeschooling, we need to know what homeschooling is. These are some points for your own benefit, but it's also for the benefit of your child and for the benefit of your budget, because one of the big things with starting to homeschool is the budget issue, and many people start homeschooling simply because they cannot afford to put their kids in school. It's vital that you spend some time getting to know what your rights are and what your child's rights are and what is required of you as a parent to home educate. It used to be a lot more relaxed, but with the BELA bill now becoming a reality and the homeschooling policy having already been enforced, we can either manage these challenges we face with the regulations by being informed, or we can hide away and hope that the enforcement doesn't catch up to us. I think the latter is a bad idea. So for your peace of mind, it's good that you know what can make you liable. So knowing to know the laws and regulation is extremely important. And the main point we need to know is that education happens in your home most of the time with you as a facilitator, but you can also get help. It doesn't mean you're not allowed to get help. The law does allow for you to have an au pair or a tutor or a teacher, a family member, The department does, however, not like it if you leave your child at home and you have a domestic worker at home and your child's in front of a computer doing online schooling and you're not there. They do not consider this homeschooling, and if you allude to that, you will not be allowed to homeschool. A good idea is to set up a quiet space dedicated to learning. If you don't have a space like this, you can just use your kitchen table or your dining room table, or just put a desk in your child's room. Parents must research learning styles, approaches, and methods. Even parenting style is a good thing to look up and read about, because that becomes almost a pivotal feature of your homeschooling journey, because your parenting style influences your child's learning directly and will influence your approach to teaching. So that becomes quite a big factor. I know it's not something we often speak about, but and it's not homeschooling related, but it is actually important. It does go to the general psychological and emotional development of your child. So you need to spend a lot of your time researching these things, watching your child, analyzing your interactions with your child, and then take what you already know of your child and what you've learned about the laws and what you've learned about, different parenting styles. Look at what's available for you. Appropriate and affordable are important aspects. And then you can choose what you're going to use in supporting your learning journey. Many people rush into buying a curriculum. And right now there is really so much to choose from. But take your time, have a look at everything, and decide what you want to use based on this period of getting to know your child, because it costs a lot of money to buy the stuff and then it sits on a shelf. You can ask me, I've done it a lot. Something I haven't spoken about much, but I think I'm going to become quite vociferous about it, is about this formulation of a roadmap. I've always said that you must start with the end in mind, and one does that anyway if you're doing a project, but it really becomes important when you're homeschooling. And it's not easy to do because you obviously don't have a glass ball and you can't see what your child's going to like or want. But it is quite possible for you to list options for yourself as an end goal. You don't have to only have one. So if you formulate a roadmap when you start, you can do it in a mind map format, and you can do a little picture or just a journal entry, or use a diary, or buy a specific book for this, or use an app on your phone. There's really many options for you to do. You don't have to do what everybody else does. But basically what I'm suggesting is make a little ideas board for yourself about your homeschooling journey with your children, and you can keep it private. You don't have to show anybody else. It's something for you to refer to, just to keep you on track of where you are and where you're going, and to make annotations as things change. It'll help you stay focused when life gets difficult. Winging it is something we all do in all aspects of our lives, but I've just decided to put a message up about it, because I've done a lot of winging it in homeschooling, and it is an exceptionally helpful, I don't want to call it a tool because it's almost an anti-tool. It's when you don't have tools and you don't know what to do, you just wing it. So you rely on instinct, your gut feel for things, and you don't work according to your plan anymore, and you just deal with each matter as it comes up. But at least it's something. You don't get totally lost if you wing it. But if you're not careful, it can get out of hand. If you find that you are on your homeschooling journey, and this can happen within the first 6 months or the first 6 years, there isn't a particular thing that happens or a time where this starts. It's about life and how life happens around us, and the crises we face and the losses we have and changes we go through. We go into this sort of automated functioning of life, and we wing it. And it is a way to cope. It is a mechanism that keeps us afloat, but it can get out of hand. And if we're not keeping an eye on it, we can lose a tremendous amount of time, and we can lose many opportunities for our children. I've actually become very grateful that I've had this opportunity, because as I watch things change in the world as quickly as they have, I've realized in retrospect what the meaning of homeschooling has been for us. And it's not an academic thing, and it's not something I planned, but the opportunities you have to catch your children before they fall through the various cracks are greater. There are more of them, and they are bigger opportunities. There's more you can do compared to if you weren't with your child on a daily basis. I've divided it into the why, what, when, and how, to try and keep it as simple as possible, because it's actually a very complex matter. I'm actually still learning about how to do submissions, and I've made many. So I keep learning something new when I read about it, and I've been looking recently at the way other countries do it. It's similar to what we do, but there's just so many formats you can use, and so much to be said about that, that I'm just going to try and keep it simple. So let's start off with the why. Why would you write a submission to Parliament as a citizen in South Africa? Well, firstly, because you can. We live in a country where we have the right to influence regulations and laws, which is fantastic. I'm very glad we don't live in places where we have to sit still and shut up. If you can do this, why would you not take advantage of that to especially ensure more freedom at each opportunity? So the BELA bill is about education, but if you go and look on the PMG and the Dear South Africa sites, you will see that there are many laws being formulated in South Africa at the moment, which are going to govern all sorts of things about our lives, our children's lives, and pertinently at the moment about intellectual property, ownership of what you say and do and write, is actually going to change in the future if we don't keep an eye on it. So we should, as citizens in South Africa, be making more of an effort to actually speak to Parliament so that we can influence these regulations, because we can. Specifically to the BELA bill, we need to do this because this is going to protect our children's right to choose. Okay, so we're on the why we should do a submission. And the main reason is because the laws seek to regulate us, and they're going to limit our freedoms. And we need to make submissions to prevent that. And like I said, even if it doesn't work right now, if we don't get to prevent it today, our persistent efforts right now are eventually going to accumulate, and it's going to make a difference later on. So we need to just keep on trying. We really can't give up. So we need to protect our children, and we need to help protect the rest of South Africa's kids in the future. And particularly because Parliament has invited you to comment. They've put it out as a public statement. And the way that our participatory democracy works, that because you've been invited, you can never go back and say, oh, I didn't have a chance to say anything, or I didn't know. By doing this, they've covered their bases.
Rebecca, just on what you were saying now about participating and you can't come after the fact, I think this is why it's important then on submissions to add in, for example, what we discovered when Mpumalanga opened for the NCOP level, the ad that was basically advertised the day before the first public hearing.
Yes.
So for those of us who have this information, who went through this process, we discovered it as a group, and we need to put these things into our submissions precisely actually to kind of safeguard the South African out there that turns around and says, but I didn't know about this. Because if you don't mention something before the fact, it's not valid after the fact.
I want to mention something here about onus. Onus is, whose responsibility is it? The onus is on you to find out what you need to know. The onus is not on others to make sure you have heard them. There are channels where it's understood and accepted that they're going to put out information, and they do it. And if you're not watching those channels or looking for the information, the bottom line is it's your own fault you didn't know because you didn't make an effort to find out. And I know that's harsh to hear, but that is the hard, cold truth. So that is why the government can get away with what they're doing, because us as parents are not watching to see what the government is doing. But that is the truth. If we do nothing, nothing's going to happen, and we can say nothing about it later on. Our education system has done its level best to prevent people from learning about these processes of governance. So it's actually a very good idea to impart this information to your children. We need to teach them about politics and how law works, because your whole life revolves around law, what you are and aren't allowed to do. And that's what politics is. So this nonsense about don't talk about sex in politics is it's a terrible idea. Kids need to know about politics, and they do need to know about sex, and there are ways of discussing these things appropriately as a parent. And quite frankly, it's the parents who should be doing this, not government. So you need to take what the government is saying and filter it so that your children's ears can hear it in the way you would like to present it, because their minds are impressionable. You don't want to harm them, and you don't want to scare them. Yeah, so that's all I have to say about the why. Any questions about that? If you'd like to stay on this topic for a few moments, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, good morning. I don't have a question, just a comment that I agree with what you're saying about kids being impressionable, and us as parents, it's our responsibility to keep up to date with the laws that, facilitate and guide their growth, essentially. So I like just the way that you framed the whole don't talk about sex and politics. It's important. And we now have that freedom of opportunity to have these discussions with our kids, which is personally a big reason why I'm homeschooling, is to filter that information. So thanks for that.
It's a pleasure. Absolutely. I think in our heart of hearts, we all feel this way, but we've been so conditioned by society that there are taboo subjects. And it is difficult to talk about because it's emotional and it's challenging. And much of the time, adults actually don't know where they stand on these matters because things change a lot. So what I believed when I was 19 and what I believe now is quite, although my principles are the same, I believe many different things in different ways. So that process of change happens to every single human being. And if we keep that separate from our children's process, it becomes difficult for them to actually speak about their own feelings and thoughts and questions. So I think in general, the more we talk about things, the better. And that we just, like I say, filter it and try and keep it age appropriate, because we can tell when we're talking to our child. They look into our eyes and we can see the expression on their face if what we're saying is too much for them to handle. And sometimes you have a 6-year-old who can deal with everything and your 16-year-old can't. So each parent who knows their child has to manage that for themselves. They can't actually be told by somebody else, this is the way you must do it, and it must be done by this time in this format. It's not fair on the child. And parents have to manage that. Okay, so we're going to move on to the what.
Rebecca, Alna had a question here in the chat where she asked, how often do policies need to be amended?
Sure. I don't know if there is a particular time frame that they would say that you have to do it within this time frame, but it looks like the rotation is around about 15 to 25 years, depending on how thorough the policies or the act have been amended and how much change has happened. So this is again why politics is important. If there's been a big political change, obviously the new political dispensation is going to be wanting to make huge changes. And when that happens, you absolutely want to be on top of things. Now, we've actually reached a very interesting phase in South Africa, where politics works in cycles of around about 30 to 40 years, maybe a little bit shorter in some countries. And it's not by accident. It's actually quite a designer cycle that's imposed upon us. And as dispensations of political power change from one time to the next, there's always a period of confusion and struggle and revolution and upheaval, really. And they always go for education, because education is the very thing that influences the next generation of voters. And essentially, whoever comes into power or is seeking power and has an opportunity to manipulate education so that they can get more power later on, they're going to use every opportunity they can. So our children are the targets. They always have been, and they always will be. And it is very political, and it's specifically about conditioning of their mind. And the younger you start with the child, the more effective it is, which is one of the reasons why so many homeschoolers are absolutely against the change of definition in the SASA Act, where it says the basic education will now encompass grade R to grade, I think it said grade 9. Sorry, I've lost my track of thought there, because it's actually different in two documents.
The previous policy, the policy for the registration of learners for home education, was in 1999. And then the policy that we currently have on home education was released to the public on the 6th of November 2018. So we can basically then say, we can see that all educational policies that span from 1996, 98, 99 are now kind of up for review, up for updates, if one can put it that way. And we've run a process of a good, I mean, on the policy alone, if you see it being brought out in 2018, we're running 5 years now already on this policy.
And we need to bear in mind that we also have an entire global trend. They would like to see some kind of consistency in law across the board on our whole planet, and education is the best way for that to be implemented for the purposes of global regulation of all peoples. So, and that has a time frame as well. I think 2030 is what they worked on. But we do know that our Department of Education have stipulated their own deadlines and timeframes for 2024. If you look at all the documents around the curriculum statement, they all have their aims for this year. So that is why last year and the year before, there was so much movement. They want to implement everything this year. I don't know if they'll get it right, because we have the voting in this year as well. But that's why we're here, guys. We need to put a spoke in the wheel, make our submission, petition government, because I think petitioning is an avenue now as well at this phase. Make some noise, get onto the radio, write things to magazines and to journals and your local newspaper. Don't be quiet. Say something, and you never know who is going to read what you've written or hear what you've said, and it's going to inspire them to do more, and maybe that person has just the right contact.
So Alma wrote here as well, the policy on home education is from 2018. A lot has changed since then, especially since COVID. You would think that they would update policies regularly.
No, they haven't.
If you guys go take a good look at the policy, and you go and you compare that to clause 35 on the BELA bill, you will see that it is almost the exact same thing. Almost. It covers the exact same aspects, if I can put it that way, maybe just in slightly different wording. And then I want to take you to, unfortunately don't have the date and time, but where Mr. Ndlebe, who wrote the bill, specifically pointed out that policies and regulations are strikeable in a court of law, but by bringing in policies and regulations into the body of law, and then affording the Prime Minister broad powers to make policies and regulations, strengthens what they are doing in the law. So if you're looking at clause 35, this is my opinion, guys. If you're looking at clause 35 and you compare it to the policy on home education, you will see 99% similarities. By bringing in that policy as the law in the Act, that ratifies the policy in a working capacity out there on the ground. That is why clause 35 I find is very dangerous, because the prescriptiveness of it, which is what lies in policies to prescribe how you are supposed to do something,
and
has now been brought into the law.
ironically, it's always been this way. This isn't actually something new. It's just that it hasn't been enforceable in our instance for this particular topic. So it is going to...
So, Alma, maybe that is why they're not updating the policy on home education and keeping it as it is from the one from 2018, because if they have to now update that policy and they are trying to use or find a loophole, if I can put it that way, to make policies more enforceable and less and give less opportunity for it to be struck down in a court of law by bringing it into the body of law. If they had to go and change the policy now, it means they would have to go and change clause 35 in the billable. I don't know if that makes sense.
It should actually work the other way around. You're supposed to have your act first, and then the policy is a supportive document that explains the act. So that is a problem with the way they've done it, but it is quite acceptable to do that in a legal framework. And in South Africa in particular, this has actually become the way they do it, to the point that laws are changing so quickly that people studying law at the moment, while they are in the 3 to 4 or 5 years, whatever they take to do the studies, it changes while they study. And while they're doing it, they get updates all the time. They've got an entire section now in second year law that's just about this, to teach them that you can't stay up to date. These are just some ideas you can talk about in your submissions. As we've gone through the Zooms, we sort of interject with ideas. You must just keep a notepad and note down ideas, but you should actually find your own ideas. But you can discuss the definitions themselves, because this is actually the pivotal point. I'm definitely going to be doing that, because they change the meaning of what you're actually doing. And like the government was always saying, this is not new. We must do the same. We must say, homeschooling means this, and this is what we've been doing, and it means this to us. It's not new. It is an entire sector and genre, and this is how we've been doing it. And what you're doing is trying to limit it. It will become less of what we do. So you can talk about that. Then you can talk about research you've done. Maybe you don't like the idea that your child must start formal education in grade R, or you feel they shouldn't have to read before they're age 12. You can go do research about that and say why you should have the option of not conforming to or complying to regulations in the phase assessments or grade assessments or whatever it is they're talking about. And then, of course, you can look at the clauses specifically, and you can tackle any of those that you have. Okay, the win of our submissions. This bill seeks to amend certain definitions, provide that attendance of grade R is compulsory, and provide for system improvements in terms of admission of learners to public schools. This was the main idea for it. The government is approaching this more in terms of mainstream public schooling than homeschooling. So that is one of the reasons why so much has actually been neglected for our sector. And they've given us opportunity to now submit, and they've given us a deadline. They don't give us much time. And one of the problems is they always give us these deadlines over a period when everybody's busy. This year they did it again over Christmas. Everybody's on holiday or writing exams, and now we're trying to get our year started, and we've got just this week. So the when is important because our time is running out, guys. We've been invited to comment, and this is the email here. I'm going to see if I can highlight it. I can't highlight it on the slide, unfortunately. But it's belabill@parliament.gov.za, and we've got till 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon this week to make our submission. And like I've said, you don't have to have a long submission. I know there are those of us who've been doing this for a very long time. We've got many, many pages. I've heard of documents of 30 pages. But you don't need to do stuff like that. You can literally do one sentence. A good sized submission is about 4 pages. If you think about it in terms of a CV and a committee who's going to read through submission, a 4-page submission can say a lot, and that should actually be sufficient. But if you don't want to write that much, you can do a 1-pager. And I do think that all homeschoolers can churn out 1 page of ideas on what's happening to their lives and their children's lives. I know we are pressed for time, but we just simply have to put the time aside to do this. So that brings us to the how. How do we do our submissions? So the first thing is you need to actually spend some time getting to know the topic, read and chat about it, and join Zooms like this one. That was the purpose of this. A couple of us realized that everybody is stuck on how do I do this, and I think I took for granted that people would know to just go and write a sentence on the Dear South Africa platform, because they've been going since 2018. So what, that's 5-6 years down the line. But yeah, many people still don't know about it. I think that is about the easiest way to do it, is go onto the Dear South Africa platform and go onto the billable campaign. And there's many campaigns. You can really spend a whole day just looking at what they're doing. But go to the billable campaign, and there where it says have your say, you can click on it and literally fill in the fields. It's done for you. It's so easy. And because Dear South Africa is directly linked to Parliament, your submission is logged in Parliament. Even if it's 1 sentence, it's fine. You don't have to write a heck of a lot. You just have to go there and say, this is my name, and this is this about me, and this is what I have to say and what I think and feel. You can decide to agree with the billable if you so agree with it. You can decide to agree with maybe a portion of it, or you can reject the thing entirely. There are options there for you to choose. They've really set it out very nicely for you. It's super easy. It takes maybe 5 minutes, and then you have made your submission and you have done something to influence the laws that are going to limit you. So if you are spending your time reading through things, make notes on a separate piece of paper and just keep it aside. I've got hundreds of them, so I've actually managed to confuse myself more than help myself. So I suggest you keep 1 book. Well, look, we've only got a week left. I think just take today and tomorrow and get the submission done, and then spend the rest of the time this week getting other people to do submissions and help them do their submissions, because the more numbers we have, the better chance we have to actually make Parliament stop what they're doing and listen to what we're saying. We need numbers. They're not going to listen without the numbers. And the Dear South Africa platform I'm harping on is brilliant, because the government can't tweak the numbers there. If 50,000 people comment on that platform, Parliament has to listen. They really have to. But we don't have 50,000 people there, and we don't know why. That is a very big question mark in my mind, because when it came to gun laws, there were plenty of people commenting saying, okay, we don't want to give up our guns. When it came to expropriation laws, I think they got to, 200,000 people. They had something to say. So you will notice that these laws didn't pass because people spoke up. They're still trying to pass them. Make no mistake, they're never going to stop trying. But that's why we must never stop preventing them. So do your research, do some in-depth reading if you need to, and then just write your submission. You can make it as complex or as straightforward as you need to. Okay, I've done a very, very basic list of a guide to a written submission. These are just guidelines. I'll just read through them, and if you've got ideas of what else we can do, you can pop it in the chat, because I'm sure there's so much I haven't thought about. Start off with writing a short intro of who you are. You have to establish your residency or your citizenship or something like that. You've got to say, this is me, I'm here, I'm standing up, I want to speak. You can't do an anonymous submission. I've actually heard people talk about this, and it's the strangest idea, because we are citizens in a country and we're going to speak up for our rights. How can you speak up for your rights if you're not even prepared to stand up and say, this is me? Use straightforward language as far as possible, because we don't know exactly who's going to be reading this, and we don't want to come across as elitist and pompous and difficult. We actually want them to hear what we're saying and make the changes. And if you can, state the exact clauses you're referring to. If we have a look at our the flow chart, I actually forgot to put that up, Oshi. I don't know if you've got it available. We're not going to have time to go through that today, but it is a self-explanatory flow chart that you can look at. That gives you a very nice indication of each step and what the clauses are. So it's super easy for you to go and look at what it's saying and what the step is that you might not like. So let's say you don't like the fact that you're going to do phase assessments, and if your child isn't moving from one phase to the next, that you might not be allowed to homeschool. Write about that and use the clause. You can use that flow chart as a guide to help you write your submission. If you've got no idea what to write about, that's going to help.
Rebecca, we have a question here. Is it true that family who are residing overseas can send emails too? I would be of the opinion.
Yes, no, you can. If you are a South African, absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you are a South African, still a South African citizen, but you're residing overseas, then you could. It would be the same as if you are working overseas and it's voting year, and you go to the embassy of the country that you're in, and you actually cast your vote for your country there. You could, but I cannot imagine if it's family members that are citizens of that country which they are residing in, they're petitioning at governmental level, I think.
You know,
I don't know. Would that be included?
It can be included. You can actually go onto the Dear South Africa website and put that information there. We don't know, however, if it will be counted. You see, that will be decided by Parliament themselves. They probably will count it if, for instance, you are a mom who's living in the UK and maybe you're married to a UK citizen, and that citizen writes because it's going to impact his children. Maybe they've got a South African citizenship as well. So then his opinion over his children is absolutely relevant. So they would have to allow that. But if the uncle speaks about it, you know, he's got no skin in the game. So that we don't know. But because we don't know, we must certainly try. And in the submissions on the Dear South Africa website, when Parliament is done with all of this, the CEO of Dear South Africa is actually invited to present these submissions. So he will go through them and actually say, okay, we've got 400 submissions from different countries in the world of people who have interest in this law because it affects their family directly, and this is what they've had to say. And maybe if there's a substantial amount and it's an international opinion, maybe that would put some pressure onto Parliament to take into account. So I don't think we must discount anything, but I don't know if it is going to be relevant. And if we look at the way government does manage these things, if it is in their favor, if those 400 submissions from all over the world are saying, yes, please, we love the BELA bill, then they will probably say, oh, how wonderful, we have an international opinion, we really should listen. But if those submissions say, no, we don't like it, then they're probably going to say, no, you people are international, don't come and tell us what to do. So this is how they work, as we know.
And we got another question here. Can a foreigner, example, a Zimbabwean living in South Africa whose child goes to a public school, may they have a say in the BELA bill?
Yes, of course. Yes, they would if they are living in this country and they have residency, then it is applicable to them because their child is schooling here. They will have to.
I wouldn't even say that. I would even go as far as saying, Rebecca, that even if they don't have residency, if their children go into school or going to South Africa school, that they would have some form of a say, precisely because of the school's admissions policy that came out in 2021, where it actually says that no lack of asylum-seeking papers or documentation is a reason enough to prevent such a child from attending a school in South Africa.
Yeah.
So
absolutely,
I do
that would be a
think that
doorway.
they would have to have a say because the government has opened the doorway with regards to that school admissions policy.
No, that makes sense. I'd forgotten about that, and it is true. And that goes to the rights of the children to get an education. South Africa has made it possible for children who are not South African children to still have the rights that any South African child would have in our country, which I think is wonderful. Divide your submission into easy to read paragraphs if it gets longer than a page or two. Make it easy for that person to move from one section with their eye to the next so they don't get lost. There's a flow to it, and you don't irritate them, because remember, you're trying to gain the favor of the person that you are writing this to. Although it's to Parliament, somebody's going to read it. And there's two things we need to consider here. Firstly, don't irritate them by being mean or verbose or putting down too much information. But also don't irritate them by being a suck-up. I have read some submissions that just make me cringe. Don't apologize to that you're writing for them. This is your right. You've been invited. You mustn't be sorry. You must be confident. You must be kind. You must be definite, and you must be certain about what you're saying. You're not begging them to read this, but at the same time, you're not wanting to alienate them. So don't gush too much and thank them too many times. And I don't know if I'm getting my meaning through. Ushi, I don't know if you want to say something about that.
I think what's important is to remember to be bill specific, clause specific. That's the important thing. And I think it's important to be short and sweet. Especially if you're going to write about a lot of clauses, be short and sweet about a clause and feel confident enough to put in if you're saying that, for example, I just want to look here at one of the things that I just logged down when we were, working out a few things. And I had written here, for example, that sending parents to jail is not a positive remedial action, and it's indicative of a government that considers themselves the wardens of the citizens instead of working for and alongside the citizenry. This is the difference between a communistic government and a democratic government. Democracy dictates government for the people. Communism dictates people for the state. We should have the confidence to be able to write that and ratify the fact that we are a democratic country. We want to work with the government, and we want the government to work with us. And another rationale that I wrote down here, sending parents to jail breaks up the family unit and will burden the state in caring for children that are well cared for by their parents. And then I wrote, this is an aggressive attack on the family unit. It's still putting it down respectfully, but it's putting it down to the point that is what you're busy doing here.
Yes,
and we don't want to view you as the government in such a light.
Yeah. No, I like
it. Just on another clause, something that I wrote down is because I found this would be clause 2B, substitution for section 36B, increase. Just a quick summary of what that clause is about is an increase in criminalization and penalty for any person who does not comply to section 3A1, which would be enrolling a child for school without just cause to prevent a learner from attending school. So my rationale, there was actually a question. It's what or who does this any other person refer to? Because in the subsection before that, 36A, it pertinently mentions a parent. And when you look at the definition of the parent in the BELA bill, it would be any legal guardian. And so I asked her, what or who does any other person refer to? This paragraph is vague and unclear as to who
Yeah,
it
who
refers
is
to.
that?
It needs clarification before it can be included, because it's kind of like a double jeopardy
Mm.
that's going on there.
One wonders why they've got it in there as an extra. It's like there's something else that they want to put in there, but they don't want to state explicitly. I worry about that.
Yeah. And so what I've done, for example, when it comes to the under 6, where it says clause 2, and it's 3A1 that it amends the inclusion of grade R. I wrote down, for example, children born during the last half of the year from July to December would be emotionally too young to be enrolled for grade R for the year in which they turn 6, especially children born in the last quarter of a year between the months of October and December. So, I mean, I have 2 children that are born on 24 December and 26 December. So I would have to enroll them in the year that they are 4 by that month of September before they turn 5, because technically, according to the BELA bill, they would have to be enrolled for grade R in the year that they are 5, but turning 6. But they're turning 6 at the end of that year. You know, so they would be 5 their whole grade R year, which I do feel for certain children, not all children, it does put them on an emotional deficit.
It always
And
used
then
to be like that, and they're changing it.
yes, so and then I explained that in my paragraph there, and then I went and I actually cited we went and we researched a couple of documents, research documents, I just want to say, not just articles written by journalists or opinion pieces, but actually
There's so much
research documents by UNICEF or the LEGO program or the Cambridge community or the nidirect.gov UK articles that
and the
that points to that
Pennsylvania
children of that
University
age
had a
should
lot.
be playing. And
Sorry.
and we also found articles that would talk to children being taught to read too early, how that would be detrimental for them, actually, for their educational development later on when it comes to the scientific studies. So there's a myriad of ways for you to go about doing this, doing your submissions, but I think you must be pertinent, bill specific, and country specific as well, and to our situation. On the note of the grade R, we actually have a South African homeschool mom, if I'm correct, just correct me here, who is also a professor, and she actually did a research study on play and development, and her name is Dr. Renuka Ramroop. Please go and Google her research paper on this, because she is a South African. So just to legitimize that we have South Africans that have actually gone and done research in this manner, and it's not being considered. So it's great to use international papers, because there's far more of them available, but we do have South Africans that actually have done these studies. And then just on the note of the curriculum as well, I know the curriculum is a big problem or big question for us as homeschoolers, because we have especially for our studies like sciences and geography and history, we don't always have assessments built into our programs, those homeschooling programs, but we have South African curricula that was written by South Africans about South Africa's landscape in history and geography, which work on the lap book model, which have had great feedback, what I can hear from people within the homeschooling community, saying that their children really loved learning and using that program. And two that are worth mentioning are Meandering with Mzansi, or Through Mzansi, by Ursula Wilbraham, and then obviously the Footprints
I think that one
curriculum.
is also CAPS compliant.
These types of curricula that we use don't have like tests built into them, which makes it then difficult to actually assign like a grade to the work that was done, or a percentage to the work that was done. But to point out to government that we actually have legitimate curriculum in South Africa written in this manner, which delivers great results. And there should be a different way to be able to assess our children according to the prescribed homeschool program that we choose to use.
If you include information that's personal, keep it short, make it into paragraphs, and pose questions to Parliament like you did with who are they talking about? Who is this other anyway? What is that? And then obviously submissions that include complex arguments is going to take much longer for them to to read. So consider what you're saying and how long it is going to be. You can also address specific points or all of them. Some people are doing submissions that go from one clause right through to the very last one, which I think, how many clauses do we have? I think it's
54 clauses.
52, is it 52 or 54?
54 clauses.
54 clauses. So they're going to have 54 paragraphs. I don't know how many pages that's going to come up to, but you know what? If you want to do that, that's fine. It's actually great because then you have been exceptionally thorough, and it's all there for them to look at. But it isn't necessary. As homeschoolers, all we really need to deal with is the things that are going to impact on us. So you can do all of them or you can do some of them. But it is important that you highlight your own perspective. So if you're going to do all 54, you have to have an opinion on a perspective on each of those. You can't just mention, oh, clause what, I don't like it. It will be there noted, but it's not going to really go anywhere. Yes, I mentioned here 4 to 5 pages, be concise, emphasize your key points at the beginning so that you can be clear. It's good to start your petition or your submission or whatever you would like to call it. It's good to start it with your key points. Like you want to talk about maybe these 6 clauses, you can list them and maybe have a general 2-sentence statement as why you want to have those amended, and then go into detail so that they know what to expect. So you outline not only the issues, but how the problems can be addressed. If you can make suggestions, that would actually be very helpful. Now, we're not going to make, this is a tricky part. This is a bill, and the clauses are going to make administrative changes to parts of an act. What we are addressing is not the issues that are already in existence, but the clauses that are issues. So if we want to address the definitions, we speak about, we don't like the definitions because that is the issue, and this is how we would prefer the definition to be. We can't now re-establish the whole framework of homeschooling and schools and the Constitution in our submissions. And if we can make a recommendation, all the better, because then it's going to really solidify what we mean. And then, of course, only include documents, supportive documents that directly relate to your key points. So if you've done research and you're talking about, I'll just keep to the reading age, and you found evidence that shows that forcing children to read very young actually decreases their ability to read with comprehension when they're teenagers. You need to put that research. You can't put research in that's tangent to that, but might be nice to hear. Don't do that. Just put exactly what you've said, research for that. Okay, so write your submissions and please send them to Ms. Skaka from the Select Committee. The committee is for education and technology, sports, arts, and culture. That is the ambit of their jurisdiction. And they are in the National Council of Provinces, which is separate from the lower house of parliament and is completely separate from the president. The president is an entity and the NCOP is an entity, and they have to agree before this can become law. So we are writing to the National Council of Provinces and we're asking them to make amendments. If they do not consider our amendments and if they do not make the changes and they like it the way it is, they now send this bill, its draft, the draft bill, to the president, and he will sign it and it will become an act. And these will become enforceable laws. I've mentioned here that it's good to see the various organizations, but they're not official channels of communication. The purpose of all the BCC and CC campaigns that are going on now is to safeguard our record of participation, because we consistently have this issue where the government doesn't acknowledge our records. So there are some organizations that are trying their very best to keep a record, and it's good. I'm glad they're doing that. I'm not doing that because I don't have the email capacity to do so. You have to pay for the email space, and I don't believe Gmail is a safe way to do it, because it's very easily hacked. So yeah, do that if you can, but if they don't acknowledge that, we mustn't be too shocked and surprised at the end of the day. So the only way to actually have your voice heard is to speak directly to Parliament, because Parliament invited you to comment. So you can write to the billable email address, billable@parliament.gov.za, or you can go onto the Dear South Africa website and put your submission in there. The reason why they're both equally important is well, because one is the official channel and the other one has a connection to Parliament. It's the only platform of its kind in the country, and it will work. And I like it because if Parliament is going to play games with our rights, then at least Dear South Africa has our back in that regard.
Yeah, I've written here to one of the people that asked about how are we allowed to send our submissions right now. It's only by email, or is there another way? So I wrote here, email is the only avenue, and if public oral participation is made available. And then I said you can email Parliament directly from your own email with a third-party checking system to ensure your submission is not lost. But the best avenue is DRSA platform, as it is an individual delivery method and an automatic third-party accounting system on DRSA side. DRSA is also the only civic organization that has a kind of a mandate with Parliament to deliver a presentation of their findings, and no other civic organization have that recognition with government. And I think people need to understand this about the DRSA platform. They are the people that actually won the OTA case for South Africans.
From, and that's why they've got this ability. I think government gave them this doorway into Parliament before they realized what it means, and since then they've tried to shut them down. So I don't think another organization is going to get this right. I think by the time government realized the space it gave them, they were too late, and they can't just take it back because the government made an agreement. So we need to almost try and help protect Dear South Africa as a community, because there isn't going to be another one like this. If government does manage to shut them down or break them down, we will only have the channel that the government will give us to write to them. Technically, the law states we should be able to write on a piece of paper and actually send it to them. And the fact that we can't could even also be a matter for submission, and they shouldn't actually be allowed to finalize all these bills that they're doing, because we don't have a post office that we can use. I don't know if everybody knows, our post office in South Africa went bankrupt last year, and they've been closing down all the branches across South Africa. There is no longer a state postal service. And the only countries that have this kind of thing happen are places that are and have been at war for decades, because it's no longer possible to keep that kind of infrastructure going. For a country like us to not have a post office it's just the strangest thing that's ever happened. So technically you have to have a post office to be able to communicate with each other and with your government, and we don't have one. So the government is relying on their email, which is often down, by the way. There have been instances where, excuse me, you try to email them for days and it's just not available, which means that the only avenue of communication they've given us is not viable. So what do we do? The next step is Dear South Africa, and because it's got offshore servers, they can't shut the email down. So in my mind, Dear South Africa is the most reliable avenue we've got to make our voices heard in Parliament. I'm not sure why but even amongst the homeschooling community, there have been a movement against South Africa, which is an absolute mystery to me. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. It's absolutely bizarre. I have my conspiracy theories about that, but yeah, this is what we've got: the BELA bill at parliament.gov.za and the Dear South Africa .co.za BELA bill. Just a note here, because there has been so much effort to shut down Dear South Africa, there is one or two fake sites. You will see they will use the same wording but put the dot in a different spot. And if you go onto that site, you can't actually do anything there. I think the purpose of doing that was to try and shed or break the credibility of Dear South Africa.
So I just want to answer something here that Rochelle wrote. She says, strategically, it might be easier to encourage friends to send comments via DRSA instead of convincing them to send an email. What do you think? I'm about to send out a message. So what I want to say to you, I wrote to you here, Rochelle, I said, DRSA is the safest option because if Parliament has a shutdown of the email, DRSA still carries proof of your email sent. So we saw that now just before December where people were on the homeschooling groups were saying, I sent my email, but it sent it back saying not delivered, not delivered. You know, anybody can shut down their email system. Any company can do that, put a rule or a function in there just to not receive any more emails. Then you're stuck with, okay, well, now I have sent my email from my own email. Yes, I have copied in a third-party checking system, but none of the third-party checking systems that we currently have available to us, we do not know for sure if government will accept what they bring to the table. I think that is my biggest concern there. And I'm not saying that you must not use them at all. I'm saying if you want to do so, but there are safer options. And this is where DRSA comes in for me. I've been looking at DRSA and other groups that have been offering things for many, many months now, since almost the beginning of 2023, and done comparisons as to how things actually work. And at the end of the day, the markers for me are the following. One, DRSA has the individual delivery submission function that goes via their server, delivered as an individual submission at Parliament. It will not and cannot be counted as a bulk submission. And anybody that claims that is telling a lie, because it even clearly states that on the DRSA website.
Yeah, but that's the chain I told you about. There's definitely a move to discredit them. And yes, I have not seen a move like that in any other industry other than the homeschooling sector. There is a movement within the homeschooling sector that wants to prevent homeschoolers from using this very useful avenue, and it's very concerning.
The second thing for me is that should government then have an email shutdown like they did here towards the end of December, and you've sent and submitted via DRSA, because it lies on the DRSA server, what actually happens is at the end of such a process is that government does a tally of the emails that they have received. DRSA does a tally and a matrix document of the emails that they have received. And they put these two documents together when it comes to the presentation that Mr. Hutchinson does in Parliament. And that is why they are known and called the watchdog on Parliament, because they had precisely these issues with the OTA saga. And I mean, OTA took, 10 plus years to sort out. And in the end, the citizens won their case. So I just want to answer your question here actually before typing. Does the bulk submission thing of DRSA not come from one of the PCBE meetings? Yes, one of the people in the PCB, on the PCB committee said that, but it doesn't make it true. The history of DRSA is what shows what they do. And I think that is what people should start looking at, is what is the history of DRSA? Where did they come from? How have they been impactful on legislation in South Africa? What is their actual function? All that information is available on their website. And what I really appreciate about DRSA is they don't go walking around dissing any other civic organization's efforts. And I find that honorable. So no, DRSA is not a bulk submission, because it is an individual delivery system that just goes via their server first for an accounting purpose, and then delivered at Parliament's inbox to the correct person who pertains to that committee or that legislation's email that needs to disseminate that again to the people within Parliament. It actually works according to that function. It's an individually delivered email via the DRSA service system where that's captured individually as well. And they obviously meet all the POPIA requirements. And I do not know if any of the other third-party accounting systems are compliant entirely in that manner. And I'm not saying that they are not. We don't have verification. We don't have proof or history on what has been done. And there's another thing I'd like to bring under people's attention is that DRSA is non-partisan. What that means is they are not for government or against government. They are not ANC haters and DA lovers or vice versa or whichever way. They are non-partisan. They are there just to report on the voice of South Africans. And it would do homeschoolers well to understand very carefully that we are in an election year. And we should be mindful how we politically align ourselves at this stage, because the fight here is about the BELA bill and the education of our children. And we do not want to get into a political tussle about this at the end of the day. We want what is best for our children. We want what is fair and right for us as citizens, for us as parents to be viewed as responsible parents who love and care for our children. We are not criminals on the outset, and we're doing the best that we possibly can for our children. And once we go into political alignment, that becomes murky water, and the government will look at those things. They will consider who are we engaging with, or through whom are we engaging with them. It is important to consider these things.
That is,
and stay non-partisan and stay billable specific.
The government already shows quite a lot of partiality towards groups like the teachers' unions. When a teacher union member stands up and says, "This is how we feel about that clause," it seems to hold so much more weight than if a citizen in their separate capacity says something. And we also need to take cognizance of that. I think we can end now, because we really have been at it for a while. I have got the process up on the screen. We go, from application to the consideration, and then the government actually choosing whether you may or may not homeschool, which is 5A and 5B. Those are the two options you get after the consideration. And then there is a process with each one. If you are refused, you can appeal, and then appeal again, and then either they will let you or won't let you homeschool. And if you are homeschooling, you have to, at the end of each phase, supply phase assessments with reports that are signed off by a SACE registered teacher, which is somebody who is registered with SACE, is current, and has got the relevant qualification to your child's grade. Now listen, this is very casual, guys. We need to be in conversation. Please don't look at this as me sitting here telling you what to do in a presentation format. I'm doing this because I saw that there is just not enough conversation around this with willing participation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I really found this presentation very informative. I just wanted to find out, is it possible that somebody like you mentioned, Rebecca, you've done quite thorough submissions. Is it possible that they can be signatories to that submission? I mean, would they accept something like that?
They actually would, Nazin, and I'm thinking of doing something like that.
Okay. So,
Yeah,
but
I
that
think-
can be in addition to our own submission.
Yes,
as well.
absolutely.
Okay.
Nazneem, what I want to point out to people is that this is the national NCOP phase that's ending on the 19th of January 2024 at 4 o'clock. The Mpumalanga legislature is, their written submission period is open up until 31 January 2024. We've now received some information that points that Gauteng will be having one public oral hearing per week running throughout the month of February. They have not indicated whether they'll be opening a written submission period and how long they will run it for. We are guessing that they possibly would, because that is part of the process that legislation has to follow. And then we are waiting to hear from all the other provinces. There is speculation that all the other provinces may be running their dates concurrent to what Gauteng is doing now, but there is no confirmation of that. And then at the NCOP level is the only time, yes, where petitions actually count. Please remember, the moment you put your signature to somebody else's submission, it is then considered not an individual submission anymore, but a petition. And I know Concerned Citizen is running a petition as well, but many other people are more than willing to start petitions to get signatures for themselves on there too. And then from here on, the process would be, if it is voted in by the National Council of Provinces, the bill then gets sent to the president. The president can also be petitioned, because the president's mandate is to establish whether the BELA bill is constitutionally sound. So he actually has to approach the Constitutional Court with this bill and get feedback from them to see if there are aspects of the bill that would not withstand constitutional muster. Should that be found, the bill is then actually supposed to be sent back, if I'm correct, to the PCBE level. So there are still a couple of steps here after, and now is basically the only part in the legislation making where petitions really have an impact. Earlier on, it wouldn't have had such a great impact on the PCBE level because the petitions counted as one voice. One can put it that way, but now petitions actually have a space where they can make an impact.
Petitions have sort of reached the same level at this level as a submission from like a union, like the teachers union. They consider organizations or collectives as having holding more credence right now at this point, because the PCBE part was actually for the citizen. And that ended. This section is a little bit more official in terms of kind of the groups that run the subsections, if I can put it that way.
Thank you for that, Rebecca. And how do I get hold of your WhatsApp number?
I think it is, if you look on HSSA and click on it, I think it does show. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it here in the chat box and you can take it down.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, you're very welcome to message me. And we keep on trying. That's all we can do, hey?
Yeah.
So she asked, would it be better to just do one submission, or should we do more than one? And should we either only do personal email or DRSA? So I'm writing here, if you're pressed for time, I'm saying if you're pressed for time, do your submission via DRSA for safety to validity. You would still be sending your submission from your own email via DRSA. Remember that you're sending from your own email via DRSA. So yeah, for me, the validity and the safety of the delivery system, I'm sending it. And I mean, you can either do it on your phone, you can open your notepad, you can write it on there. When you go onto the DRSA platform on your internet, on your phone, you in any case have to put your own email address in there. Or if you're working from your PC or your laptop, you work in a Word document, you can paste that into, you open up your internet on your computer, you paste that information into, and you access DRSA on the internet, you paste that in there, and you still have to put in your own email address from where it comes from. And this is why what Rebecca said earlier on about this thing about anonymity, it's kind of pointless, guys, because you're either putting in your cell phone, which is recode, or you're putting in your email, which is listed with some company that has a tax number. I mean, we are all known. We're all known to our government, and we shouldn't be scared to participate.
Exactly. But for those who are scared, it might be an idea for them to participate via a group and a petition now. But what that does mean is that their voice that wasn't made as an individual is a loss for the petitions and the community, because it just brings down the numbers. And at the end of the day, the government looks at how many people said what. And if we are left, which we already are, our voice is not really going to count. It will be overshadowed. We can fight it in terms of we are a minority and we're being discriminated against, but we can only do that if we actually take it to court. It is a process and we'll have to take those steps. And if we look at the track record of what the homeschooling community has done or have done for them, every time we take a step in that direction, it is nullified in some way or abandoned, or we run out of time, or there's no money, or there's just always a reason. It never goes anywhere. There's never been an instance where we have fought something as a community and actually stayed the course. Not once. Not that I'm aware of anywhere. And if anybody's got information to that, I would love it, because I would love to use it to say what we can do. It's at this point for me an embarrassing reality that our community has done nothing to protect ourselves, really. We've done a lot of talking, myself included, and we haven't been official and organized enough. I don't think we realized just how quite serious it was in the beginning, and by the time it became serious, it was such a scramble to get everything together that it's taken a lot of time. And we're not experts at this. We're not legal eagles, and we're not politicians, and we're not educators, and we're busy in our lives with our children. So it's absolutely stands to reason that this has not been easy. So when I blame us, myself, collectively, I'm not doing it to point fingers and to discourage you. I'm hoping that it will encourage us to do more, actually.
Just on the thing of extension. So I think the quickest way to get that going is just to actually send an email.
Yeah.
Send an email. Can somebody pop? I don't have the correct email memorized in my mind for Nolithando Skaka.
I've got
Can somebody just pop that here into the chat so that everybody can just send an email and say, I'm requesting an extension because, and you state your reasons for the national NCOP level to submission period to be extended. Please point out national. Also, Nolithando Skaka is the communications persons for the national level. And Ms. Pretty Mtlangu is the communications person for the Mpumalanga legislators group on the basic education.
Okay.
So they are. So for the extension on the national level, the BELA bill at parliament.gov.co.za, and you obviously engage with Mrs. Nolithando Skaka. Send that email and do your submission separately.
Everybody who's had any chats with her or emailed her have come back with really a good report. It's a huge job that she's got, but she is very open to communicating. So for those of you who like to communicate directly with these government officials, it's really not a problem. You can even phone her. I think her number, I don't know if I put her phone number on here. Oh no, I didn't. Well, if you go onto the PMG website, her phone number is over there. I unfortunately don't have it handy with me now, but her phone number has been made available. It goes straight to messaging. So what you do is you just leave a voice note and she'll phone you back. And she actually does.
Taz, yes, this NCOP level, I think how one needs to explain it is that the PCBE, okay, is a portfolio committee made up of MPs of Parliament. And they operate what they call in the second house, which is they are the oversight committee over the process of the lower house for legislative making on a specific topic, if I can put it that way. NCOP is National Council of Provinces. They sit in the upper house, and they also within their provinces have their own committees actually that live there, that work there, and that sit on the different committees for the different legislative bodies. So you would have an NCOP level for basic education, you would have the NCOP representatives for health, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. And so this level is for the upper house of parliament, and they slot in with the National Assembly, who is the group that basically, group of MPs that voted in the BELA bill to be going on to NCOP level on the 26th of October 2023. But yes, from NCOP level, if it will go back to Parliament, will be debated, the MPs will then vote on it, or actually the National Council of Provinces, they will vote on it, and they need a 7-2 vote to have the BELA bill ascended to the president. If they don't reach a 7-2 vote, then I think it goes back to the drawing board.
Yeah,
Does
we
that
can
make
vote for
sense?
that.
Did I explain that clearly enough, Rebecca?
I think so. And the other point is that if this is delayed until the voting and the seventh parliament comes in, if I'm not mistaken, because it is a, what's it, a section 76
66 bill, yeah.
Yeah, it has to start over with the new parliament.
But does it then start over at NCOP level, or does it start
I
over at
think-
a PCBE level?
I think, and I might be wrong here, I think it actually has to go back to the DBE. And they've got
Sure.
they've got to resubmit it. And yeah. Anyway, guys, this has been great. It's very long. I keep trying to make these shorter, but there is so much to talk about, and all of it is important. We have left out a lot. We will just keep doing more Zooms, and I will just shuffle the order in which we do it, so that when you start, we can start with a different topic and end with something else, so that if you attend often, then you can just get through all of it. And if there's something specific you'd like us to talk about, or you've got an idea, or if you'd like to present something, please contact me. The idea behind these sessions is that we are collaborating, we are a community, and I want community involvement as far as possible.
Is there anything that if there's anything that you ladies feel that we need to talk about, or that you want information on, please WhatsApp us. Many of us are on different groups. You can find our numbers on there as well, and you can just WhatsApp us, and then we can see how we can find information to help.
If there's any last requests for anything, please put your mic on and stay. Otherwise, I'm going to say goodbye and end the meeting, and then we will.
Hold on, I'm just quickly typing something out here in the. I'm just scared the chat function stops. I just want to add something in the bottom.
I will wait. I'll wait for you to finish, and then I'll switch off.
What the two are. So I wrote on Taz's, but this NCP level is a different than Parliament. So I said upper house of Parliament. BELA bill is a section 76 bill, which has an impact on provinces. And then I just wrote underneath that PCBE is the oversight committee on the procedure and new bill schedule needs to follow. This committee forms part of the lower house, but made up of MPs, members of Parliament. Next question Taz had here was, so it's a different people receiving our comments and requests about the BELA bill, right? I am assuming that when you are writing to Parliament, there will be a group of the different provinces there as MPs that represent the provinces at an NCOP level. But then when you are writing to the provinces itself, when you're directing your email to Priti Mtlangu at Mpumalanga Legislature, that will be a different crowd of people receiving that written submission. But that group of NCOP delegates actually need to gather the information and inform from the provinces their delegates in Parliament how to vote. But as Rebecca pointed out, obviously we do have the toe the party line issue in South Africa with all our political parties. It's not just the ANC.
I think they do coalesce all the submissions in the end as a body, if I'm not mistaken. So
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
I said bye-bye, Camilla.